how to do those particular tasks, and then from there you can ramp up to almost anything. But the key is to get them working. Now I was just curious about what the motivation is in high school anymore, what the caste system is like in high school. And I see it hasn't changed all that much in the 110 years since I've gone to school. All right, so getting back to some of the conclusions that we can draw from the Porter article. Upgrading productivity of all clusters. You'll see over the next couple of days, I'm going to kind of sing, not necessarily the same note, but I'm going to keep coming back to it. What I'm finding more and more is that upgrading the productivity of all clusters requires us to upgrade the productivity of the workers that are in those clusters. Not necessarily the capital, not necessarily the machines, not necessarily the technologies, although that's important. But if we don't upgrade the labor force, if we don't improve the quality of the labor force, then we will not be upgrading the productivity of our clusters that we find so important in our region. Finally, Porter talks a lot about innovation. Innovation, come up with new ideas. Well, how are we going to come up with new ideas if we are not intellectually stimulated? All right, that's not Porter, that's Tony Sindo. Okay, we need to be intellectually stimulated in order to come up with new ideas. Well, how is it that we become intellectually stimulated? Is it simply because of the existence of colleges and universities? What is it that stimulates us intellectually? What stimulates you intellectually? And please don't say television. Although maybe it does. I don't know.
A challenge?
A challenge, yeah, a challenge, right? And what would give you some of those ideas?
Just trying to be able to overcome the problems that I've had.
Yeah, overcome the problems, looking at problems other people have had, right? What about, can we see a reason, perhaps, that your quality of life, that you live as a way of inducing your creativity, as a way of fostering your creativity? The way that we work and the way that we play. The way that we play plays an important role. What kind of leisure activity? We call it leisure, but sometimes leisure is just as taxing physically as our work. I can't tell you how many times I've gone on vacation and said, I can't wait to get back to work so I can relax. Right? Because you try to fit in so many things. But those vacations are important. Even the word recreation. Break that word down. Recreation. What are the key words? Recreate. You are recreating yourself. So we can't just simply focus, in my opinion, we can't just simply focus on bringing industries in, although that's important. We have to focus on the entire holistic approach to regional development. We have to bring in, we have to encourage our recreational activities, the recreational infrastructure, as well as our employment base. In that way, we'll see a lot of, that will put at least some upward pressure on innovation. What do you think of that? That's something that the literature has kind of been missing. I've been looking for holes in the literature, if you haven't guessed by now, because the literature is rife with things that we talk about all the time. Clusters. We talk about that input-output models. These are all necessary things to understand. But I've been looking for holes in the literature, and one hole that we've been talking about would be improving quality of the workforce. Down to at the high school level, I see there's very little evidence in that right now. But I was also looking at this innovation thing. Porter got me thinking about this, saying that if innovation is so important, well, how do we encourage that? How do we induce that? Can you teach creativity? I don't know if you can teach creativity, but you can certainly create an environment. Stephanie, what do you say?
I was going to say, you can create an environment, but I see, like in the school system now, we're so busy trying to teach the kids to color in the lines, there is no creativity for something to grow. So there's not going to be any new products coming out, I think, with my generation, or any really cool things, because we've been stunted. We're not learning anything new. We're not trying to learn anything new. We're too busy with our Game Boys or whatever else that's in front of us. Okay. Then we're not going to make anything new. We're not going to strive to make more.
All right, Cynthia, what were you going to say?
No.
She got it. She got it, right? Yeah. Yeah, I'm singing to the choir here. That's very much it. Go back to the schools. How many school districts are eliminating music programs, art programs, even some sports programs, never football, but sports programs, right? in order to fit what? I'm trying to figure out what they're trying to fit in there. And fit another math class, another science class. And yet the product, the output, is still a little weak. I see the output. We all see the output as educators. Here, we see the output of high school. So eliminating an art class and a music class has not improved, in my opinion, the academic quality of students coming out of high school. From anecdotally, I haven't done any kind of empirical study on that, but I haven't seen that. So how do we retrench? And I think that's a good word for it, retrench. Perhaps we need to go back almost to basics and say, what do we want from our students? We want them to be able to communicate. We want them to be able to reason. We want to be able to add a couple of numbers together, you know, and we want them to create. And how do you create? Maybe, I don't know if art or music classes is the answer, but something along those lines where we encourage just free thought. And those free thoughts is where the people who are inventing the Game Boy games have been doing that. They probably dropped out of school because it was boring to them. And then they created, look, Bill Gates, look, he dropped out of college. I guess he showed, we showed him, right? It's, so, yeah, we need to be able to create in order to innovate. And creativity, while I don't think it can be taught, it certainly can be encouraged through environment.
Tony, one thing that there is some there is very little literature on it, but I was surprised that Porter never jumped on it because he is an industrial organization economist. Mm-hmm. That's where he comes from. And economists like that try to explain the world in the sense of what is the structure of economy. If you've got one big firm or many small firms that are competitive.
Right.
The second tends to generate creativity. When you're dominated by one big firm, mm-hmm. it basically stunts it because everything's internal to the company. You can't do anything different. Mm-hmm. I'm very comfortable. I'm making a good dime working for this. Right. It's like Detroit in 1970 versus Detroit in 1900. Detroit in 1900, very vibrant.
Yeah. How many automobile companies were there in Detroit in 1900? There were about 30 of them. Yeah. And then there was a consolidation, massive consolidation. And then what happened to innovation? It was the top 5% of the folks were the innovators. After the consolidation. Prior to the consolidation, about the top 50% of the folks were innovators. And that was incredible. That's a very good point that you bring it up.
Industrial structure then can explain a lot of
things. If you have a highly concentrated, now Porter does talk about the HHI, the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, saying that the more concentrated a particular cluster is, the more stunted its growth tends to be. And there were some interesting correlations there. And and those of you who don't know what that index is, it doesn't matter. What it is just a measure of industry concentration. The higher the number, and there's a way to calculate that number, the higher the number, the more concentrated the industry tends to be. Which means, a Herfindahl-Hirschman index of, let's say, 10,000 is actually just one firm in the industry. It's a pure monopoly. So it's a pretty high number. And as Dr. Johnback pointed out, in the early 1900s in Detroit, there were many different, several industries, but there were a lot of participants in that industry. Now, in the automobile industry in Detroit, in the year 2010, there's only a couple of real players in there. And what has happened to innovation? It's kind of fallen by the wayside, and I agree. The more diverse a particular industry actually becomes, the more innovative they become. It's survival of the fittest. Competition breeds innovation. But what has happened to our competitiveness? What has happened to that competitive edge? And that is the question for economic development practitioners to really address. What has happened to that competitive edge? What has happened to that drive? What is that's really going to drive us to grow? What is that's going to drive us to innovate? And that is again, like I said, one of our fundamental questions that we have to address.